Hi, it's Andy from Able Training. So I thought I'd do a little bit of a vlog this time on something that's kind of affected some people close to me just recently. So one of the factors and one of the things that we teach is about understanding self-harm. And we work in quite a lot of settings where self-harm is a potential risk factor, whether it be children's homes, foster care, learning disability centres, mental health, and even elderly care. So I think it's one of the things that people worry about. I think especially parents, particularly, find it extremely challenging and upsetting and difficult if they find out their child or a loved one, any loved one, is hurting themselves. I think we've moved a long way over the years as far as understanding about self-harm. The one thing I'd like to say start off with, although that I think people are more aware of it now, and people definitely are, it has a slight higher level of stigmatization now, I think, than ever before. Um, it's been around forever. There is evidence of self-harming in the Bible. There's evidence in hieroglyphics as far as self-harming behavior. There is numerous evidence throughout time that people have engaged in some kind of harming themselves, hurting themselves, to whether it be ritualistic, whether it be as a demonstration of servitude, or whether it be a way of coping with difficult emotional challenges. I think one of the things that I try and get across when I'm teaching about self harm is that we all display certain high risk or self harming behaviour. We can all display behaviours which we know are maybe not in our best interest when we're in a calm state, but we display them when we're feeling extremely distressed or overwhelmed or angry and things like that. The number of times you may hear somebody, for instance, going, I've had a rough day, I'm looking forward to a glass of wine later or a beer later. Well, one way I put it across that although society judges that as appropriate, essentially that is ingesting a glass of poison to overcome your emotional difficulties. So we all engage in certain behaviours along those lines, whether it's be having a drink, or for some people it's having a cigarette when they feel stressed, even though they know that smoking is bad for them. Um, or even things like driving really fast in the car when you're feeling stressed. We all know that increases our level of risk. We know it's dangerous, but it can make us feel better to get that adrenal surge and things like that when we're feeling overwhelmed. And I think this is one of the things when you look at statistics as far as self harm's concerned. I think recognition of self harm has gone up. And therefore, we're much more aware of things like cutting and pill taking, or even things like ligaturing, purging. So, are all falling on the lines of what we class as self harm, as recorded as self harming behaviour. And statistically, women seem to be more likely to be engaged in those behaviours than men do. However, punching things and getting into fights, I would also say, are forms of self-harming behaviour, and you're not be classed or statistically marked as a self-harming behaviour, but they still are exactly the same thing, and we gender maybe are more likely to engage in that. If we look at what self-harm is, and when I'm trying to help people to understand what self-harm is, sometimes when we're feeling out of control, we can help ourselves to feel in control by using a pain that we can control. I think I could put it better. One pain can supersede another pain. We can only tend to focus on one pain at a time. And a pain that you can control is easier to cope with than a pain that you can't control. Emotional pain is as real as physical pain. But emotional pain tends to be much harder to be able to cope with and understand and know how long it's going to last for and things like that. So that's one way of looking at it, that physical harm that I have control over is easier for me to cope with than the emotional pain that I have no control over. And this is where an awful lot of controlling behaviour, whether it be eating disorders, substance misuse, even if it is things like pill taking and stuff like that, we just take something as simple as when I feel physical pain, I sometimes take some paracetamol to reduce that physical pain. When I feel severe emotional pain, it still feels painful. So is then taking some form of medication or pain relief going to help reduce that pain? And that's where that kind of method or that coping strategy comes from. I think the more we understand about self-harming behaviour and its function, hopefully the more we reduce the stigmatisation on it. Because the big thing we don't want people doing, if they feel overwhelmed, if they're feeling like they can't cope, and they feel like the only way they have to cope is to engage in some kind of self-harming or hurting themselves behavior, we'd rather they didn't feel they needed to hide it and they felt shamed by it or thought they were going to be in trouble about it. That's a hard thing to overcome. We want them to not be proud of it, but at least open about it. That, look, I am struggling. When we've got a headache related to being overwhelmed and stressed, hopefully we feel okay to go, I'm feeling a bit rough today. I'm feeling rough because I'm overwhelmed, because there's too much going on. Well, it's a similar symptom in some ways, or a similar sign. So I think it's the more we reduce the stigmatization on it, hopefully we reduce chances of people hiding it. I think there is a lot of people who worry that it is a form of attention-seeking behaviour. And one of the things I always also try and get over on my course is that attention seeking isn't a bad thing. We all like attention. We all need attention to some degree or another. I prefer the terminology of attachment seeking, connection seeking. I'm looking for some form of connection. I'm looking for some form of attachment. I'm looking for somebody to help me to share in these feelings. So when we talk about attention seeking behavior, like it's in a derogatory way, there's something wrong with it, we should recognize that it's okay, it may not be an appropriate way of getting that attention, but it's still, they need that attention. Just ignoring it or criticizing it as an inappropriate way isn't still going to meet the need. The other thing that I find that can be easily done is when we're dealing with something that we find very distressing and difficult to cope with, it's very easy to sometimes make that particular behavior about us. If we've got a person who's then going, oh, I wish you wouldn't do that to yourself. It so upsets me. I don't know why you feel the need to do that. Why couldn't you talk to me about things rather than doing that? We're putting more shame on the person about their behaviour, making them feel guilty for struggling to cope emotionally. And we're also then making that behaviour about us. It's a way it's making us feel. It's a way it's affecting us, which I'm afraid is not a demonstration of empathy. It's more likely to create disconnection between us and the other person rather than connection between us and the other person. So when we're looking at empathy related to self-harming behaviour, we can go, look, there's nothing you need to hide from me. I'm sure you had your reasons why you felt you needed to do that, and I'm here to help you and make sure you're okay and see what we can do differently next time. And there's no problem with pointing out, obviously, there is risks to self-harming, but it's not because you judge them or you don't like it. It's just there is risks to it. We don't want to cut because we could get blood poisoning, we could get infection, we could make a mistake and cut too deep. So is there safer ways that we could then help you to cope with your emotions? And one of the things that we sometimes teach, and it's a simple little tool, but something about creating if you feel you have to self-harm, then you do, because one of the things is self-harm can become addictive. It starts off as a kind of a coping mechanism, but a bit like a drink, I use it as a coping mechanism very easily. It can, that point of, well, now I need 2 drinks, 3 drinks, 4 drinks to get the same effect, and then I feel rough afterwards. So how do I cope with feeling rough? Well, I have another drink, and that's how a potential addiction may start. Well, it's exactly the same with anything like self-harming. I do it once, I feel better, but then I need more to feel the same level of better, and then I feel worse and guilty after for doing it, and shame about doing it. So how do I cope with that shame? Well, I do it again to cope with those bad feelings. So, like any addiction, just telling somebody to quit smoking doesn't help them to quit smoking. We have to kind of create a plan with them when they recognize that behavior is detrimental and they choose that they want to change, or they realize that they want to change. We can give them methods. And one way we do that is kind of the 5 things to do before you have to self-harm. If you have to self-harm, you do, but let's try these 5 things first, whether it be, listening to your favorite music, taking a walk, spending some time with your friends, talking to somebody about it. There could be the list could go on of what really works for that person. And there may still be a form of self-harm that's needed at the end. For example, whether it be, marking themselves with red permanent marker, so they can still feel that pressure and they can still see that red. Maybe a replacement, or getting an ice cube and holding it in the crook of their elbow until they can't take it anymore, or even in their hand until they can't take it anymore. Maybe it's a way of gaining that pain, but not causing the damage that something like cutting or purging does. So it's if you've been affected by anything like self-harm, there is loads of information out there and loads of charities. Check out Mind. They have loads of stuff on there as far as advice. And also, the last point I'll kind of do in this little blog is, if you ever are worried, never be scared to ask the question of somebody. If you think they might be self-harming, if you think they might be doing something to harm themselves, do never be scared to just ask a question. I've noticed some blood on a tissue, or I've noticed that on your arm, and I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Okay, because although people go, what if that makes them hide it more? As long as we do it in a non-judgmental way and it's kind of open, and kind of, I just want to help you, I just want to be here for you. The hope would be it opens up. It's going to hopefully, it's more likely to allow them to talk and be open about it than get them to hide it away statistically. So it's still a benefit to ask. Okay. If you have been affected by this, obviously by all means send some messages in the comments or message us directly. But otherwise, I hope you found that useful. Okay. Cheers.